Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, brought to you by Music Ally, the show that's fascinated by the fun and games and finances of the music world, as explained each week by me, Steve Lamack, and him, Stuart Dredge. And yes, we are back. Apologies that it took us longer than expected, but we've been fine-tuning one or two things for our return, although our mission remains the same, to help try and demystify the music industry and bring you some clarity around some of the big trends in music, as well as their financial and in some cases moral implications. Coming up this week, Oasis tour starts. The band Deerhoof quit Spotify over arms firm fears, and the Universal downtown takeover gets increasingly fractious. But first off, Stuart is going to do a number on us. Give us a big number from the past week.
Okay, I've got a really big number this time. The number is 1.1 million.
1.1 million what?
1.1 million people on Spotify listening to a band called the Velvet Sundown, which has become the hot music industry story of the last week because the Velvet Sundown are a completely AI-generated band and their music is completely AI-generated too. But they've got more than 1 million listeners on Spotify.
Do you know what? I read this. Some of our listeners will have already read this as well. I mean, I don't want to over-exaggerate, but this is one of the most frightening AI stories to date, I think, because there were just the implications of this are massive and many. In fact, I mean, there were a couple of stories on this topic in the past week, but just so give us the bare bones then. So it's an AI band with AI generated music and photos and biog, everything behind it has been put through the AI mixer.
Well, exactly. So this kind of popped up a couple of weeks ago when it was first people on Reddit, the internet community platform, started posting about this band that had appeared in their Discover Weekly playlist. And they thought there might be AI. They were sort of saying the music sounds like AI, the photos look AI generated. And it started there, but this band already had like 325,000 listeners. So that was why it was interesting that. And it's kind of, I mean, I don't know if you've heard the band, it's kind of 1970s Californian rock, sort of that kind of, that sun-kissed 70s rock kind of washes over you. But as a casual listener, it sounds believable. You'd be hard-pressed to guess it wasn't a real band of humans. I think it's only if you're a producer or an artist or even someone like you, I think, you listen to a lot of music. I think you might listen to it and smell a rat too. But to a lot of people, it sounds like, and then, so anyway, so they had this much. And I started digging, a bunch of other journalists were also digging into this. And basically, they had the band members, they had a biography on Spotify, and the 4 named band members had no footprint online whatsoever. No social profiles, no previous bands, no concerts by this band, which is, again, kind of, quite a big clue. And they had a quote from Billboard, the industry title in the biography, which was, there was no record of that ever having been written by Billboard as well. So it was quite intriguing. And then as the story moved on, 2 companies, so Deezer, the streaming service, and a French company called Urcam Amplify, both of them have AI detection tools. So they have tools designed to kind of detect AI music. And both of them said, yes, this is AI music. And then it got even better. So this account on X, formerly Twitter, popped up that was purportedly to be the Velvet Sundown. Right. And they were having a go at all the journalists saying, this isn't AI. We're not an AI band. You haven't checked your facts. You haven't even reached out to us. You haven't come and see our concerts. You're all lazy journalists. It was very, very sort of fighty.
Yeah.
And then the guy behind this Twitter account gave an interview to Rolling Stone. And he was saying, yeah, actually, it's a bit of an art hoax, really. And yeah, okay, maybe it was AI. And quite evasive and dancing around some of these aspects of the story. And then the next day, this guy wrote a blog post saying, I'm not the spokesperson of the band. I've got nothing to do with them. I made it all up because I thought it would be good to insert myself into the story. And I want to prove that journalists are all lazy. So to recap, a real human pretended to be the spokesperson for a not real band and got interviewed by Rolling Stone. And all the time this is happening, more people are writing stories. It started being picked up by broadcast media. And their listeners kept growing and growing, and now over 1 million.
Over 1 million listeners. And do we know who is behind it then? Because someone is inputting the data, the music, and potentially, I suppose, some sort of guidelines for lyrics. Someone is behind this AI triumph. Do we know who it is?
We don't know who it is yet. They have updated their bio on Spotify, and I should say it's on all the streaming services. It's not just a Spotify thing; it's on a bunch
Mm,
of them. And now their bio reads: "The Velvet Sundown is a synthetic music project guided by human creative direction, and composed, voiced, and visualized with the support of artificial intelligence.
mm.
An ongoing artistic provocation designed to challenge the boundaries of authorship, identity, and the future of music itself in the age of AI." So and which is kind of word soup a little bit, but there is some human creativity behind this of saying what can we do with this technology and how believable can it be? But they are at least being open about it now, which is good
Yeah.
because at the beginning. But I mean, I guess there are two things in my head about this that we should talk about. And one is like this is like the tip of an iceberg. There are more of these artists, and actually, music business worldwide have been doing investigating into other artists who are AI generated. There's one called Eventhis who got 1 million listeners. There's one called Nick Hustles who's kind of hip hop meets R&B. He's got 250,000 listeners. Like I think they tracked about 11 of these artists that have got kind of significant audiences. And I was looking at as an example of a human band. So Fat Dog, who we have
Mm,
talked about a lot, they've got 200,000 listeners on Spotify.
mm.
So, and I'm not saying this to pick on them, but like they're a band you've been championing. They've been putting those hard yards in, playing around the UK, building their fan base, and yet suddenly this band who have come along and have 5 times the audience. And I think that's why this is causing quite a lot of soul searching within the industry and within musicians. That this feels like a sudden thing that's happened, and now it's bigger.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't. I almost don't know where to start with this. But just, I mean, a couple of thoughts. Not
Yeah,
in any order. This, but first, obviously, it's a trust issue, isn't it? Because now, I mean, obviously, journalists have written about this particular band, but there's, as you say, there's probably hundreds of other fictional artists out there already that we don't know are in fact just AI bots making music, or it's music being posted by AI bots. So, how long is it until we have to fact check every artist that we like on Spotify to make sure that they're actually, a genuine human group? And as you say, Deezer, I mean, Deezer did put a marker on it, didn't they? But will the other, on this saying, basically, we suspect AI is at play here, but will the other streaming companies, will they do similar, or is it just too difficult? Is it too big a task to point out every artist that's used AI or is mainly AI driven, and then point this out to listeners? I guess it would be a mammoth task, but it does leave us having to do all the work ourselves. Going, well, is this real? And I just to follow on from that, and this is the really dangerous question: is anyone going to care? I mean, we'll care and the artists will care, but there will be, I'm sure, hundreds, maybe thousands of Spotify listeners who, if they like the song, it doesn't matter. I mean, they don't care. They don't know, neither care that a bot has made this because it's on one of their playlists and, they might like it. Or it might just be, as in the case of the Velvet Sundown, it may just be inoffensive enough not to bother turning it off, and so the
yeah.
streaming figures will continue to rise.
I mean, I think that is one argument that the culmination of this culture of things listing in the background means there will be. But I think so. One thing that may be reassuring is so the figures are very big, like 1.1 million listens for this one band, but
Mm,
that's not measuring how many people like them right now. It's measuring who's read a story about it and been curious enough to go and listen to a track or two.
yeah,
So give it a month or give it 2 months. Those people who came along, listened to track or two, and then thought, "No, this is not for me," they'll be out of those figures. And so, if in a month and a half they have like 100,000 listeners, you'll realize the scale of it is less
yeah. I
bigger
mean,
than we all think now.
yeah. In this case, yes, but
Mm,
hasn't it opened the door though? In a
mm.
way, now surely there will be people going, "Why don't you could probably get away with this?" I mean, it took a
Precisely.
load of journalists to point this out, but if there's not, again, I don't want to over exaggerate it, but there's just no brakes on AI in music at the moment. There's nothing stopping it. And the more people get to see that, well, we can make some money out of this reasonably easy, then surely it's a phenomenon that can only grow until somebody or we find some way of doing something about it. And,
That's
I'd say, people don't care, but obviously the people who do care care for a reason, and there are a bunch of reasons, including the more AI bands are out there taking up the space of real bands, the less chances for real bands. Again, accuse me all you like of going, oh, Steve, this is not going to happen. But it's just the start, and all this is happening so quickly that we're going to get to the point where there will be no bands playing at your local pub tonight, because all the bands who are popular on the streaming services, which seem to have such a hold over the music industry and their streaming stats, they're not real. The ones who are popular,
You'll have to be a Velvet Sundown covers
yeah.
band.
If nothing else, sorry, just a final point. Yeah. If nothing else, what you end up with is a lot of music which is simply aping or remolding music that's already happened, because that's how AI works, and it will be in this. It's a stale way of treading musical water, because it's just rehash after I know some people also say at this point, yeah, but what did Oasis do? Isn't that what Oasis did? But then, I think even AI would have been hard pressed to create a band like Oasis at the start of the 90s had there been AI back then. Sorry, you wanted to make a point.
Well, yeah, no. So I've got 2 points actually that I'm in my head. One is, I get caught up in this. In theory, there's nothing wrong with someone creating an AI band, creating AI music for them. There is creativity involved in it, because you can't just press a button and something good comes out. You do actually have to do quite a lot of work to make it feel cogent, So in theory, this is okay, but, and this is where the music industry is worried about this. In this case, they use Suno to make the music. That's been detected by these systems. And Suno is one of the companies being sued by labels, accusing it of scraping the world's music without permission or licensing. So if you think about that, this band, not only, as you say, could they be taking listeners away and royalties away from human bands, but arguably the music they make has been built on the backs of generations of musicians who haven't been paid. So that's one thing that's being talked about in the industry. And of course, that's a legal case. It may be settled either way. I'm not prejudging it, but that's where people feel unhappy about this. It's not just that it's not a real band. It's that what the system has been trained on, But also, I think to your point about what happens now, I think this is going to really accelerate pressure on streaming services to decide what they're going to do with this music. And so Deezer, like you said, is a good example. Deezer has said already, we're not going to take this music off. We're going to leave it up on our service. We are going to tag it as saying made with AI generation tools. And they're also not putting it in their recommendations. So if you're on Deezer and you get your personal playlist of what's out this week, it's not going to be in there. Obviously, that depends on them detecting it. Stuff may get through, but that's their policy. We're not going to recommend it to you, and we're going to mark it clearly. But there are options. So options include streaming services could just leave it there. They could take it out of their recommendations that Deezer has. They could say we're going to pay it lower royalties on none at all. That's an option. No one's taken that yet. Or they could boot it off entirely and say, actually, if you want to go and listen to AI-generated music, go over to Suno, go over to Udio, where those platforms are like streaming services too. You can find stuff. So I think labels are going to be sort of talking to the big streamers, saying, look, what is your policy? And we'd like you to be quite tough on this. But I mean, it's kind of the other angle to this as well. And this is not to do with the Velvet Sundown, but there are questions around how these virtual artists, how AI music, how it gets played on services like Spotify. If they're using anything illegal, like bots, if they're artificially inflating their streams, that's straight streaming fraud, and they will be kicked off, and their royalties won't be paid. And there's no evidence of that happening in this example yet. But that's the other thing people will be looking at. Okay, if an AI band has suddenly got hundreds of thousands of listeners, how did they get that many? Was there anything dodgy going on? And if so, they will come down quite quickly.
Right. Okay. All right. Here's our top 3 stories of the week outside of that one, which has had a lot of people talking. I just mentioned Oasis. We can't not mention Oasis. The Oasis tour started in Cardiff on Friday, their first dates in 16 years, a fact that the media never missed a chance of reminding us. It's their first dates in 16. Yeah, we know. 65,000 people or thereabouts attended each night in Cardiff. I mean, it's been crazy, hasn't it? Did you watch any of the BBC coverage on Friday evening? Because they had a dedicated live channel Did you see that? I
I
mean,
saw that. I was on the Guardian's live blog as well. I was
well,
kind of following it live without. And I think there was a guy in the audience who live streamed the first half an hour, which you're not
yeah,
supposed to do, and he
yeah.
was getting enormous viewing on YouTube. I think, wasn't he?
Well, the BBC, of course, I mean, they were treating it like a rolling news story
Mm.
without, of course, any rights to show any of the gig itself, because the Oasis camp very early on, hadn't they, had come out and said these gigs will not be televised.
Mm.
Although you can tell they are being filmed, I imagine, for cinema or streaming release by
Yeah.
Oasis at some point. But that meant all the BBC had was people talking about, because they were in an OB studio close to the venue. This is there's hours of this. They started about 4 hours before the gig started. And I only noticed it after I put my daughter to bed, came downstairs, and they're in the studio just with that, and a succession of guests reliving that. Around about 9:30, said, right back to the studio, where we're joined by Matthew from Dodgy. I mean, I'm not even joking. Dodgy are on the settee talking about, oh, they've got a reporter outside the venue, two reporters live blogging from inside the venue, song by song. I mean, they really went for it, really
Mm.
did.
It's been. Do you know, interesting though that all the coverage of the actual concert seemed to say it was brilliant. I
Mm.
haven't seen anyone saying they were crap or they were surly, or it seems to have been they've knuckled themselves together and put on a good show.
Yeah.
So
I'm also quite surprised that there haven't been more stories of people being turned away because their tickets
mm,
were bought from unofficial resale sites. I think there was somebody told me who was at the gig, said that there was a queue of people, small queue of people who had been turned away, possibly because they'd bought a dud ticket.
mm.
But so far, not as many stories about that as I thought. In fact, not many stories really about the finances either. Which, I mean, no one's leaking, as far as I can tell. Usually around now, there would be some figures starting to fly around from indiscreet sources, but nothing so far really. In terms of, it's all still conjecture about how many millions the Gallagher brothers are getting, or were offered as a minimum fee, because they would have been offered, here's X amount of, here's X million pounds, you'll definitely have this is your guarantee whatever happens after this. And that we think is an 8-figure fee. It's obviously 10 million upwards or something, but we don't know what the actual figure is. I imagine there will be more, I imagine, speculation about that to come, though. Do you think in the weeks to come?
I think so. I mean, the most I've seen. I mean, a lot of people are trying to put numbers out around it that are unofficial.
Mm,
There was a personal finance company today estimating that the economic impact of the whole UK tour could be just over 940 million quid.
mm,
And that was based on what people were spending. And interesting, that seems to be a thing now. I don't know if you've noticed this. It was with the same with Taylor Swift recently, that people are trying to calculate what is the economic impact of these enormous concerts on the cities they're hosted in,
mm.
which is kind of adding up, not just ticket sales, not just merch and stuff, but also people going and eating out beforehand, the travel. And I don't know if it's partly because the music industry is getting more wise to the fact that to convince governments to do stuff for you, you need
Yeah,
to sell your economic impact beyond just we're
yeah.
making loads of money.
Yeah, I'll tell you something. One figure which also relates back to government, and bear in mind, as many of you probably know, I'm chair of Live, which is the live music trade body, it's the live music industry's trade body, and this is one of our bugbears: the fact that 20% of the ticket price is VAT. So 20% of your ticket price to see Oasis, that's VAT. So the face value, so not including, it's the money you spend on the ticket, not the additional fees. But if you bought, say, a standing ticket for Oasis in Cardiff, which was £150, then 20% of that was VAT, which will go to the governments, because we have one of the highest rates of VAT on gig tickets anywhere in Europe. In Germany, by comparison, I think it's 7%, but still 20% here. And I did some rough calculations. So, say the average ticket price for Cardiff was £200. I mean, I think that's probably quite conservative, given some of the vox pops where people were saying I spent £350, £400, whatever. But on the initial sale of tickets, say it's £200, the total audience. Well, I mean, the capacity of the Principality Stadium, I mean, it differed depending on which report you read. But let's say it's 65,000 people. So 20% of 200 is £40, right? £40 times 65,000 people, 2.6 million quid, 2.6 million pounds in VAT just for one gig. And if you want to take that a step further, an estimated 1.4 million fans will see Oasis on their reunion tour. 1.4 million times £200, take off 20% in VAT. That is £56 million in VAT for the government. I'll just leave that there.
Wow. I want to start doing sums on like how many nurses' salaries that pays for and so on. But I know that's not how VAT works.
No.
But maybe that's a good news story. You know, the tax stuff, and that money could be used to do good things, or it could be wasted on something rubbish. But you know,
You've got a good Oasis stat though when it comes to radio, which we may as well slip in here. It's not essentially tied to the gigs, but obviously anyone who's got any Oasis figures at the moment is desperate to stick them in a press release and send them to you.
well, that is the thing. So this is from PPL in the UK, so the Collecting Society. So apologies to international listeners. It's very much a UK stat. But yeah, apparently since the beginning of this century, Oasis have racked up over 7 years of cumulative airplay on UK radio and TV stations alone. And their songs are played on average 120 times a day on TV and radio.
Wow.
Which, interesting, you would have maybe thought Wonderwall was their most played track on radio and TV, but it's not. It's Don't Look Back in Anger.
Is it?
So, yeah, in the chart of Oasis songs on the airwaves, it's very much the early stuff dominates the list.
As was the set, actually, as it goes.
Yeah.
Looking at that set list. Right, big story number 2. Now, this is proper industry related. And it's something we have covered before. Things, though, are getting distinctly tetchy in the arguments surrounding whether Universal Music Group should be allowed to buy the independent music company Downtown Music. Can you explain to in layman's terms what's been happening, why it's important, and why both sides are getting quite hot under the collar about it now?
Yeah, sure. So to recap, I mean, Downtown Music might not be a familiar name to everyone who are just music fans, but it's one of the biggest independent companies out there. It owns a publisher, so it signs songwriters, but it also owns CD Baby, who distribute music. They're one of the things that independent artists use to put the music out. It's got a division called Song Trust that collects royalties for publishers and songwriters. And it's got a company called Curve that has software for processing royalties. It's used by a lot of people. So it's got its fingers in a lot of different pies in independent music. And as a marker of how big it is, Universal Music has agreed to buy it for $775 million. And this was announced kind of last year. And what's been happening since it was announced, a lot of independent music bodies and labels have been protesting and saying this would be a really bad idea. It would make Universal Music, already the biggest major label, too powerful. And so there's been a succession of open letters and guest columns for media outlets. And essentially, the arguments here are if you let Universal buy this company, it will be bigger and it can go to streaming services and say, look, we're bigger and we want you to do this and this and that. They have more leverage to kind of push streaming services around in a way that might not benefit independent artists and labels. They also say it has access to lots of data from the independent world. So this is quite important to this. So Downtown Music, like I said, it has a division that deals with royalties, has divisions that collect royalties for independent. It would get a lot of information on how much money independent music is making and how many streams it's getting. And their argument is, well, imagine what you could do with this if you were being a bit nefarious. You could maybe see when an artist was worth poaching because they're doing well, or you could see when a label's doing well and make them an offer to buy them. So a lot of the arguments are, if this deal goes through, Universal Music might do these things that are bad. It's very much kind of ifs and buts.
Right.
Um, and those arguments have been targeted mainly at regulators, so people who have to say, yes, this deal can go through, give it the green light. So that's the European Commission in Europe. And last month, the European Commission said, yes, we are actually going to investigate this deal. We're going to have a look at it. And that's when things have got quite hot under the collar. So, yeah, I think last week, the fight back began. There were kind of two things. So a guy called Kenny Gates, do you know PIAS, the independent label group?
Yes.
They were bought by Universal last year. But Kenny Gates, the co-founder, he wrote this column for Music Business Worldwide, and he kind of came out swinging and said, "Look, there is lots of competition still. This isn't going to hurt indies as much as other things are." And he sort of said like things like AI and short video isn't making enough money, and big investment companies are buying rights. He said these are the problems to focus on. You shouldn't be thinking about majors versus indies as an opposing thing. So he was quite punchy in his view.
Mm-hmm.
And then Virgin Music Group, which again, to people like, oh yeah, that's a label. Virgin Music Group is the bit of Universal Music Group that deals with independent artists and labels. So it's their kind of division that kind of deals with that side. And if it buys Downtown Music, it will be part of Virgin Music Group. And the co-founders came out with this memo they sent internally that was quickly leaked to journalists. And again, they were saying this is all lies. It's just bad faith. We're not going to use data to do anti-competitive things. It's not too big and powerful. We care about the indie community. And they sort of use this phrase, juvenile, offensive, and just falsehoods. So they're really kind of saying we're really cross about being people assuming we're going to do terrible things if we buy this company. Mm-hmm. So it's got quite heated in public. And it's kind of, yeah, it feels like a big moment because I think we've talked about this, haven't we, in the last year? This idea about there are these arguments about, okay, what's happening with independent music? Companies are getting bought up by majors. Independent music is quite a big business for major labels now. They have these arms that do distribution. And there's a lot of worry. And this is going to be the case that is kind of the moment where people are saying, right, is the regulator going to say, no, you can't do this, Universal Music Group? Or are they going to wave it through? And so that's what the arguments are preparing for, that decision.
The people who are opposed to the takeover, who are trying to preserve the status of major independents or independent groups. Who's that? I did notice even just before we came to record this episode that there was a joint letter from a collection of people from major independent record labels, including Beggars Group, which obviously includes Rough Trade and 4AD, Strictly, the American label. People like that are standing fast, though, for in defiance of the takeover. Is that about right?
They are actually. So Martin Mills, the founder of Beggars Group, he gave this quote a few months ago, talking about. I think he was sort of saying, they're saying they're going to be really good to independent artists, but he was like, "Beware, there's a wolf behind that cape." And that was quoted in this memo from Virgin Music Group, and they were really cross about this, saying we're not wolves. And I kind of, in a way, the awkward thing here, I think, is that the people who work within major labels on the independent side of their business, the people who work with independent labels and artists, so people like Virgin Music Group, the Orchard at Sony is another example. It's a famous distributor, but no, those people, they see themselves as being part of the independent music industry, and they see themselves as working really hard for independent artists. And so I do understand actually why they would be upset and feel under attack at kind of being said, you're people from major labels and you're going to do bad things and undercut the community. So I do get the kind of the personal hurt here.
Yeah.
But I think, it's also about trust. Like you say, I think a lot of the defense of this deal is we won't do those bad things you say we will. We promise we're not going to do those things. And if you step back from picking a side, that's what regulation of big acquisitions is all about. It's like saying, well, actually, if people don't trust you to do that, how can we make sure you stick to your word? Do we need to have certain safeguards in place? One thing in other deals they've done is they've made them sell off bits. So, for example, in this thing, they could say to Universal, you can buy them, Downtown Music, but you have to sell off this bit that works with independents and that bit to make sure that they still have options and that you're not using data. So I think that's what it's going to come down to is the promises on one side saying, you're saying we're going to do this and that, but we're not. And then the regulators saying, okay, well, here's how can we make sure of that? But it could go any way. It could be it could be blocked. It could be allowed through with certain restrictions or certain divestitures, I think is a word where you have to sell bits off, or it could be waved through. And whatever happens, based on the last kind of few weeks, it's going to be quite a tense moment because
Yeah.
everyone has been so cross about it before the decision was made. So yeah, when we know what they decided, the arguments could break out even more.
Our third key story of the week: American band Deerhoof are quitting Spotify in protest at its CEO, leading a €600 million funding round for a military drones manufacturer. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, so I mean, Deerhoof. I mean, I'm sure you must know them, but
Hmm.
they've been around. I think they're about 19 albums in. They're like a very long-standing indie rock band. Um, and yeah, they came up with this social media post say, yeah, we're leaving Spotify. And the story starts with this company called Helsing, which is a defense technology company based in Germany. And they make military drones, they make AI defense software. And they've got this policy of they only sell that tech to, and the phrase is sovereign democracies, which basically means we don't sell our stuff to dictators.
Right.
Um, it's not the get out clause it may seem because sovereign democracies do some bad things with weapons as well. So it's a bit hedging around the book. But yeah, and Spotify's boss, Daniel Ek, he has an investment fund. And actually, this is not a news story. Back in 2021, he led a funding round for Helsing and he joined its board. So he's been involved with this company for a while. But then recently, he led a new round of 600 million euros for the company. He became its chairman. And this was reported. And obviously, in the tech and investor press, like, wow, Spotify CEO is investing this big round into Helsing. This is an exciting news for the defense industry. But then when the news got back to music, it's obviously caused some different feelings. And yeah, Deerhoof basically said this post saying, we don't want our music killing people. We don't want our success being tied to AI battle tech. And they went on to give Spotify both powers and say, look, it's an already widely hated data mining scam masquerading as a music company. So there's a bit of bite here. They're not fans.
No.
But this is based on the fact that Daniel Ek, like other Spotify execs, he's made a lot of money from selling shares in Spotify that he owned. And what he's doing with that money is investing it. He's got a big investment in a health startup as well. One of the places where you can go and get your body scanned and check for health. And that hasn't really caused a controversy. No one's worried about that. But this company, Helsing, it has made musicians. And the thing here is, I mean, I really like Deerhoof. Like I've liked it for a while. They've got less than 110,000 listens on Spotify, which kind of cuts both ways. So for them, and they said this, we're not going to lose a lot of money. We make a lot of money from playing live anyway. So it's not really a thing that's going to drastically hurt them. Equally, it's not this sudden uppercut to Spotify that's going to make him pull out of this investment or it change.
Hmm.
It's not yet spread to bigger artists who Spotify would be more worried about losing. But talking to a few people have said to me, watch this story. Because do you remember last year we talked about music festivals that had sponsorship from companies linked to the arms industry?
Yeah.
Like I think it was South by Southwest got some heat, The Great Escape got some heat. Like this has proven to be quite a heated issue for the artists feel strongly about. And so I do wonder if more are going to see this Deerhoof story and be considering their own things, or at least speaking out and saying we don't like this. But it's hard to see anything changing because it's his personal investment fund. He can invest it where he wants, and presumably he'll be fronting up to the critics.
That's your top news stories for this week. Any other business before we go? Oh, you wanted to mention a Sabrina Carpenter tour, financial tour fact.
Yeah. Well, also, did you see she got Simon Le Bon out for a concert this weekend in London?
You make it sound like Simon Le
What?
Bon's in a cupboard or in a flight case, and she got Simon Le Bon out. She just opened up She opened up the flight case, and guess who was in there? Simon Le Bon. She got
She found the
Simon Le
key.
Bon out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they did "Hungry Like the Wolf," which was released a full 17 years before she was born, which I thought was quite.
What is going on? You've got Olivia Rodrigo at Glastonbury hauling on Robert Smith to do Cure cover versions.
I know.
Took Robert Smith out of a box. Come on, Robert.
Imagine if you got the Simon Le Bon box who you thought was that. It was actually the Robert Smith box that we.
I've got me Oasis pop stars mixed up.
That's
not the stat. What was it? It's a donation from tickets, I think.
Yes. So a year ago, Sabrina started working with this non-profit organization called Plus One in the States. And it basically it helps artists raise money for the causes they care about. So in her case, I think it's $1 from every ticket sold to her concerts in the US and Europe was kind of routed into this fund. And then this fund makes donations to charities in it's three things: mental health, animal welfare, and LGBTQ plus rights. And this is a trend. So Sabrina Carpenter has her fund. Actually, Olivia Rodrigo, you mentioned, she's got a thing called Fund for Good, and she donates to charities for women and girls, like with reproductive health, freedom, that sort of thing. And the reason I think it's so Sabrina Carpenter's fund has raised $1 million in a year, one of the fastest funds of its type to do this. But why I think it's interesting is it's not just like artists doing good work for charity. It's kind of it's a political statement in a way, like especially in the US right now, raising money and donating to causes around LGBTQ plus rights and reproductive health. Those aren't things necessarily looked upon fondly by the current people in power in the US.
Mm.
So if anyone's ever snobby about these big pop artists, it's something I point to say, look, they're actually sticking their necks out quite a bit here by saying, I care about these causes, I'm going to raise money for them. And they're under attack. And then the other thing this month we've seen is a lot of artists in the US, big pop artists, speaking out about immigration policies and raids there. So there's this kind of climate of the artists who almost have most to lose because they're the big pop artists playing big stadium gigs. They are actually saying, no, we're going to put our money where our mouth is and we're going to support things we care about. So yeah, good on her.
Can I just fire you a question which
Yeah.
occurred to me the other day? And by the way, listeners, this is where we will be answering your industry questions or inquiries. If you're, I don't know if you're a musician, maybe looking for advice, or you're, or anyone who's listening who's always had a question about how the industry works and never known the answer. If there's anything you'd like us to try and get to grips with, the email address for your questions is coming up. But it's something if a record label, right, this came to me because I was actually thinking about football teams going bust, but then it suddenly occurred to me, if a record label goes bankrupt, what happens to the rights of its catalogue? So all its back catalogue, all the records it's put out, and it owns the recording rights for all these records. So what do the rights? Do the rights revert to the artist, or do they just go down the Swanee with the failed label? Because if there's no label there to put any of the records out, but they still own it, then the records don't come out. Any ideas what the deal is with this, or would be?
I do. Yeah, I dug into this,
Good.
and I got two experts. I got Cliff Lewis, one of the top music lawyers in London, and Annabella Coldrick from the OMF, the managers body, to check my answers, and they both said yes. So,
Okay.
yeah, if a label goes bust, the rights don't get stuck in limbo or float around. They're basically assets of the company, just like the cash in its bank account or the furniture in its office and the computers and everything. Everything is an asset. And so what will happen is an administrator or liquidator will come in, and they've got to make as much money as possible to pay off the debts that label will owe. And the catalogue is usually the most valuable thing they own. Like it's more valuable than the office furniture.
Yeah.
So what happens is they'll try and sell that off, and they'll either agree a deal with another label or someone who buys music rights, or they'll auction off the rights, and see who'll pay most. So as an artist, essentially, you watch this process and go, right, someone's going to buy my rights. Don't know who it will be. You could try and buy the rights yourselves. You could go to the administrator and say, hey, I'm an artist. Can I buy these rights back? And if you've got enough money, you can make them an offer. But the one thing that there is this thing that can be in a contract, and it's called a reversion clause. And a reversion clause essentially says, right, my contract with this label, if the label goes bust or if they don't pay my royalties or breach my contract, the rights come back to me. Now, Cliff said that's not super common. Like usually the rights just get sold off. But there is, in theory, this thing you can have in your contract saying, yeah, if bad things happen, the rights come back to me. They don't get sold off.
Right.
And the other thing I heard is it's quite bleak for artists. If you're an artist and your label still owes you royalties, you're a creditor of the label yourself. It owes you money. And you have to join the line with all the other creditors, the tax man, everyone who it owes money to try and get the royalties that you're owed. If someone buys your catalogue from the label, then they also buy the responsibility to pay you royalties.
Oh,
So,
really? Okay, right.
So you will still get paid for your stuff. But to a certain extent, as an artist, if you haven't got lots of money to try and buy them yourself, you just have to wait and see who buys it and hope they're a good owner and someone you can work with.
Excellent. There you go. Well done. That's the first question of our
Yeah.
return answered very comprehensively. Anyone, by the way, if anyone's been through this particular situation, do drop us a line. And as I say, any questions you have for us, the address coming up very shortly. But finally, this week, ABBA's Dancing Queen has reached a big milestone on YouTube.
It has. It's joined what YouTube calls its billion views club. So the Dancing Queen music video has been watched more than 1 billion times. And I've got two questions for you on this.
Right.
So first question, it's the second oldest song to join YouTube's billions views club. And Dancing Queen came out in 1976. So can you
Right.
guess the oldest song to have reached 1 billion views on YouTube?
Oh, is it? I mean, is it one of those, the most popular songs ever? Things like, I don't know, something about Christmas. Is it something by Frank Sinatra? I don't know. Is it something? How old? Is it Elvis
Uh,
Presley? Is it the
it's not.
Beatles?
It's 1975. It was a Christmas number one, but it's not a Christmas song. It's Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh, right. Okay.
That reached
Right.
billion first.
Yeah.
And YouTube put some stats out. Apparently, 41% of Dancing Queen's views in the last year came from people aged 34 and under. So it's not just people who are.
It's not. It's not even their best song, though, is it? Dancing Queen. It's a rubbish ABBA song. Dancing Queen. That's right. I mean, it
That's
was. Don't you think? Well, you look like you're about to fight us over this now.
I think
Dancing,
it's
but
the
it's
one people
not.
love, isn't it? Though it's the one people like have so many
Oh,
memories with.
I find it of their catalogue one of the most turgid. And I'm not averse to ABBA, but Dancing Queen, least favourite. Least favourite. Come on, people.
But before I ask you my second question, I once went at the Great Escape one year. They had an ABBA DJ night, and there were like 3 hours of deep cuts before they played all the hits. And some of those deep cuts were fantastic, like
Yeah.
proper disco bangers. But yeah, my second question for you: YouTube has stats on where people listen. So can you guess which city in the world is the biggest one for YouTube views of ABBA's music? And I'll
New
give you a
York.
clue. It's not Stockholm and it's not London.
New York.
Nope.
It's not. Is it? Would it be? I'm trying to think of countries where ABBA might be popular. Australia, somewhere. I don't know.
No. I'll put you out of your misery. It's Mexico City.
Is it?
And second is Lima in Peru, and third is Santiago.
Right.
So the three biggest cities for ABBA YouTube viewing are in Latin America, which kind of is partly a function of those cities being massive streaming places, like lots of people.
Yeah.
But also, who knew ABBA? And on Spotify, the biggest city for ABBA listening is Jakarta in Indonesia.
Right.
So this is the world we're in nowadays.
Well, now we know where that virtual reality ABBA show, which is running in the East End of London, we know where that's heading next. Then
Needs to go to Mexico City,
yeah, go to Mexico City. All right, that's where we'll leave it for this week. Unless you are one of our kindly Patreon subscribers, because if you are, stay listening. We're having a lock-in for you, nice people, an extra section of the show where this week we'll be discussing, amongst other things, Stuart's obsession with the Black Crows. And if you'd like to join us for the lock-in and support what we're doing, you can sign up to become a fan or indeed super fan of the show at patreon.com. Thank you very much to new super fan subscribers this week, Ian Beresford and Ian Jones. Thank you very much, fellas. We'll be giving shout outs to all our new super fans over the coming weeks. Just head to patreon.com/thepriceofmusic for more details. Otherwise, it would be lovely to hear from any and all of you, of course. Any correspondence, then here's the address. It's the Price of Music Podcast at gmail.com. Any questions about the industry you'd like us to try and answer, the Price of Music Podcast at gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening. It's lovely to be back. Cheerio.
Goodbye.